Hey, folks, I hope your day is going fantastic. So, today's podcast is with Dr. Debra Oliver. Now, we're going to talk about a book that she has written, and the book is called Legacies from the Living Room, a Love Grief Equation. Now, she's going to go over some stuff here, and it's going to be really important for you to listen to. We're going to go over 3 steps of setting the stage to tell your loved ones or your kids about your illness. We're also going to cover what she calls the warning shot. Then we're also going to talk about how do we end this conversation once we bring it up. So there's going to be a lot of things to listen to and to soak in. So if you're ready, let's get going right after I remind you. If you're a pet owner, please be responsible and have your pets spayed or neutered. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Amazing People, Amazing Things with your host, Chuck.
Welcome, Debra. Thanks for joining me today, or joining us in the audience, because we have another really emotional and I think important and touching subject. And I just want to let people know that you are an author, and you're author of a book called Legacies from the Living Room. And folks could find you at legacesfromthelivingroom.com as well. And this is kind of about how not grieving, not the grieving process or anything, but really how to deal with serious illness, especially of loved ones or friends, and then also how to talk to doctors and get some answers and get them to listen to you.
Yes.
So, again, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being invited.
Yeah. Now, Debra, why is it that you wrote this book? And I do love the title of your book, and you look at it, to me, it's got play on words and it makes sense, you know? So why did you write the book?
Well, my husband had written a book called Exit Strategy while he was going through chemotherapy, and he had 42 months between diagnosis and the time that he passed. And he told me I'd write a book, and I didn't believe him. But as I talked about my experience and shared kind of the caregiver's experience as opposed to the patient's experience, which is in his book, people started asking me for a book. And I said, where can I get your book? And so I decided, yeah, I probably have some valuable things that I can share, and decided to write them down. Because it is different. There are many books written by people who are going through serious illness. There's not as many written by the people who take care of them, and what you go through as a caregiver, and knowing that you're going to lose the most important person in your life, and
Yeah.
how you take care of them in that process.
Yeah. I want to start off by asking, because you've been through this and you're going through this right now, and how is it the best way that somebody can tell someone else that they have a serious illness? And I ask this because I have a friend that is going through this right now as well, and they kind of held back a little bit from telling their children until it was a absolute diagnosis. So how do you go about, or how would someone go about telling someone?
You know, that's a great question. It's like, how do we break bad news, basically? And it's our tendency as parents, especially, to protect our children. But we fought that and decided to be completely honest as we went through the process. Both my husband and I taught medical students, and we actually teach doctors how to break bad news. And there's an actual protocol, and it's helpful for anybody, anytime that you have bad news to break. We call it the spikes protocol. First, you got to make sure that your setting is right, that you're not doing it in a real rushed time frame. You're not in the middle of the street, that you're in an environment, even on the telephone, that's comfortable and where you're not going to get interrupted and people can concentrate and can focus. Secondly, you want to ask about what is their perception. Saying something like, well, you know, we went through some testing today for X, Y, and Z. And then you invite them and say, you know, do you want to know what we found out? And so you're setting the stage with those 3 steps. And then to say something like, well, as you know, we were probably looking for cancer. And our news wasn't really good. And we call that a warning shot, so that people then just pause and wait a minute so they can absorb what you just said and prepare themselves for bad news. And at that point, you say what it was, what the problem was, and they found that we had terminal cancer, and actually they expect a life expectancy of less than 6 months or whatever it happens to be. And I know that you probably have a lot of emotion about that. And then you listen to that emotion. And last, you leave with some kind of a strategy or hope. But there are things that we're going to be able to do. And we're going to need you, and we're going to need your help, kids. And that's how we chose to do it as well. There's never any easy way to do it, but to try to prepare somebody and then say it as it is, and then provide some reassurance at the end, I think is a pretty good strategy.
Yeah, I would imagine that the person that's getting that bad news, meaning that I'm the cancer patient, and that's hard, and that's just hard on one. But also, I would imagine that the person that's receiving the news, the child, or the children, that's just as hard to accept.
It is.
So
And, you know, you got to make those pauses so that people can absorb that because they're in shock and they're not expecting it. And to try to rush that process, as we're telling our kids and trying to protect them, is not helpful. And so
yeah,
taking your time and being honest and establishing that trust right up front, what we found is that then our kids knew if we could tell them that we would not lie throughout the process. They could trust whatever it is that we said, however good or bad that information is along the way. And our relationship was a little tenuous at first in some of the cases. We had 5 children, grown children, and it's amazing how sometimes we can come together in the midst of crisis once we establish that trust.
yes. Forgive me if I jump around a little bit, but I wanted to kind of carry on with this area
Okay.
because I I have gone through some experiences. I'll say third hand with some friends, and it seems like that when you get the bad news, and I'm not the cancer patient, but I'm the child that gets the bad news. I start to avoid my parent, or I start to avoid my spouse or my best friend because I'm afraid what to say or what not to say. Uh, do people go through that? Is that a normal reaction sometimes?
I think it really is. We're afraid we're going to upset them more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we isolate them, and that's a bigger disservice. So, one of the strategies that my husband and I used was to not let that happen by reaching out and pushing those conversations. Immediately after we said that, we everybody came home that night and drove for hours in some cases so that we could be together. And we invited that and welcomed that and sat up all night talking about and processing those feelings together. It is our natural tendency to try to avoid those, especially as we want to protect each other. But in protecting each other, it means we're not supporting one another, we're isolating one another and not going through the process together. And the person that has to take that lead is the person who is the patient. Because most of all, everybody's trying to protect them, right? The person with the
Right.
cancer. And my husband was really good about that. And he'd laugh about it, he'd joke about it, he'd make it easy for everybody else. And that, I think, was a great gift that he gave to our children and to me because there was nothing that we couldn't talk about.
Yeah. Um, I think the other thing too is, if you're coming to visit the person who's ill, don't bring. This is just my thinking again, and I'm not a medical professional or psychiatrist, psychologist, or anything like that. But I know that you have a doctorate's degree, a PhD, and everything else. But my thing is, and I've said this to some friends, is don't bring your emotion to that visit, because if you bring that emotion of sadness, sorrow, whatever it might be, it the person that you're going to visit is going to feel that too. And I think that they end up feeling down as well. And then they become worried about you, who is not sick.
And I think that depends on who you are. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
different with our children than we are with our friends, for instance. Um, with our kids, we encourage them to share that genuine feeling because we
Mm.
felt better if we knew where they were and to honestly process that together. And so we cried many tears together, and that was okay. Now, our friends, that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I could be a mother where I couldn't be a friend, and I couldn't take care of some of my friends' emotions. I had to take care of my emotions. But I did need to know where my kids were and my grandkids. And I remember many conversations with two of our grandchildren were teenagers at the time. And both of us had had many, many conversations with those are such delicate years. And we go, we know you're sad. It's okay to be sad. Let's be sad together. Now let's think about how we're going to do this and what great times we can make in the meantime and try to
Yeah.
turn that around. And we talk a lot about redefining hope, and hope is traditionally thought of as living for a long time. And so people fight wars and fight battles against cancer so that they can get time. We chose, instead of that fighting for time, to fight for quality and to fight for building a legacy and making memories and having fun. And so we fought hard in order to be well enough and strong enough to go ahead and make the trip to Europe that we always wanted to take with our grandkids and our kids. And the list just goes on and on. And in doing that, hope became more than just quantity of time. And ironically, we ended up with much more time as a result of that, because we decided not to spend our time in clinics pumping bodies full of poison to kill the cancer.
Forgive me for, you know, repeatedly asking and staying on this particular part of the topic. Is it a detriment to either side if you continually share that sadness? Because you know, like you're saying, you should make this plan. You should not look for. Well, you didn't say this, but don't look for the end and be sad consistently and all the time. This is a time to um, acknowledge that what has happened, but then to move past, move forward, to make these happy memories because the time is finite.
Right.
Um, so is it okay to look at it that way? And the reason I ask this because again, I do know some people who are always sad and they do say, I don't want to go see them because, you know, they're dying. And then they're constantly sad and avoiding rather than saying, all right, there's 6 months left. We already acknowledged that I'm sad and I feel for you, but let's make some happy memories.
You know,
Is
we do ourselves a disservice if we get stuck in anticipatory grief. Anticipating the end is natural
Mhm.
and has some value. But you can get stuck focusing so much on what you're going to lose tomorrow that you lose it today instead of
Yes.
tomorrow. And that's what we have to be careful of. And I think the disservice we do is if we harbor that internally and don't try to work our way through it with someone. And if you can't work your way through it with the people that are going through it, work your way through it with somebody else because you're missing out. You're you have only so much time. And you don't have time to get stuck in the anticipatory grief. You will grieve later, and that's okay. Um, if it means putting on a false face for a while, put on a false face. but
Mhm.
you're never going to get the opportunity to ask the questions and to do the things and to say the things that you want to say if you don't do it now. And we knew at the time, and I think it's true for most people, the time of diagnosis is the time when the person's going to be healthier than they'll ever be again, because the process moves forward and you get ill and you become less able to have those conversations. And it would be so detrimental to have the if only feeling when it's all over. I wish I would have
Yeah.
done this. If only I had said this. If only I had known this. Well, you're lucky. You do know that time is going to be short. And so make your amends. Say the things you always needed to say and work through those. But harboring sadness and silence internally, you're cheating yourself and you're cheating the other person. Um, I know it sounds easy and it sounds maybe, too easy, but it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
And if it means bringing in somebody else on the side in order to help you process that, it's going to be worth it in the end, because I don't regret one single day of the 42 months that we had. And there were times when I would get sad. There were times when the kids would there were times we all got sad. Um, but wow, when you could work your way through that and have the laughs, those have carried us through the grief.
Yes. I'm glad you said the ask, say, and do. Those are important, because you'll never have time to do that once that person is gone. So that's really good. And I also really like the fact that you mentioned that, if you are having a difficult time, you can maybe reach out to somebody else and talk to them and say, hey, I'm having this hard time going through this. What do you think? And just have somebody else as your emotional support as well.
The subtitle of the book is The Love Grief Equation. And that comes from the more we love, the more we grieve. If you love somebody a whole lot, you're going to grieve a whole lot, and vice versa. And the way to get through that is to focus on the love side of the equation, to focus on the memories and the joy that that love brings, which is why you grieve. Ironically, it's the price of love. But if you can hold on to those good things and those great feelings, it will help you through the grief side of the equation.
Yeah. I never heard of the word, and it's got to be out there because you used it. Anticipatory grief,
Yes.
which is so true. And I look back at, for me and other folks, it's like, that's what we were going through. That's what it was. So thank you for introducing me to a new word,
Another
a
word
new
for that
term.
is early grief. It's before the loss. You know
Hmm.
it. People have that even when you know you're going to lose your job, right? And so you start thinking about losing your job before you lose your job, and it's no different when we're talking about people. And you can get just really stuck in that.
Yes, it's a very depressing state.
Yes.
So, uh, your book, again, I mentioned that they could go to legacesfromthelivingroom.com, and that's the title of your book. And like I said, the sub on that is A Love Grief Equation. Uh, it's How is this book laid out? Are there not courses, but guides to, grieving, guides to go through certain processes? And I know that you talk about 5 secrets to getting your doctor to listen, which sounds weird. It's like, doesn't the doctor always listen to me?
Have you not been to a doctor?
Yes. Yeah, and you're right.
We work
But
hard to teach them. Yeah, throughout the book, we decided that we would educate the world about our experience and share it. And so along the way, we learned several tricks. And we would try to think about, okay, this has been such a painful lesson that we've just learned. What can we teach others so that it won't be so difficult. And especially given that we talk to and taught medical students. And too often when we go into a doctor's office, we don't go in with an agenda. They have an agenda and they have 15 minutes. And we teach people to be doctors and to think in 15 minutes. And if you go in and you're just unloading a whole lot of things in a very unorganized way and emoting a whole lot of feelings, you're going to waste your 15 minutes and they're not going to hear the question that you have. So I like to encourage people to go in very, very organized and know what they want and know what the purpose of the visit is. Be in charge of that 15 minutes and drive your agenda, because it's the only way you're going to find out. So make a list of your questions in advance and then make sure you stick with it and you answer. And if you have specific things you want to report that you think are pertinent, go in and list those. Doctors think in bullets. We teach them in PowerPoint slides, right, which are bullets. And so go in with your own set of bullets and then be very direct and do that right up front. What I need most from you today, doctor, is to take care of this pain. Or what I need most is to understand when I need to go to the hospital because I'm very confused, or whatever the issue happens. Start there, begin at the end, and work your way back. And you will get heard in a much different way because they know what you want and they know what your expectations are. And they'll work their stuff in between, never fear.
That's really good recommendations, especially to write it down and know what you have to say. Because I think a lot of people go in and say, I'm here, where's the doctor?
Yeah.
Where's the doctor? They're sitting in the room waiting. And then the doctor comes in and then I'm going to once again guess, because my mom does this. They start talking about other stuff and how they feel this way and how they feel that way. And you have to wonder, well, this is why the doctor's behind schedule.
That's right.
And the other thing too is, again, I'm just throwing stuff out there, is I would imagine that this is why a lot of people come back and complain about, well, it didn't fix what my illness or ailment was, is because, again, I'll use my mom as an example. Do you hurt? Uh-huh. Where do you hurt? Oh, here?
Yeah.
How about there? Yeah, there? And here? Uh-huh. And you don't know what you're saying when you go in there. And like you said, you're just kind of emoting all this other emotion and stuff. So the doctors can't really give this proper diagnosis. And you go home with a prescription and you go, well, that didn't help after 3 months. Why not?
Exactly. Or, the doctor walks in, he goes, how are you? And the first thing we say is, oh, okay. And it's like, no, that's probably not the case. And, especially if you're with a patient, and I always recommend that somebody go with a patient, especially if they're on medicine and they're slightly confused. And when the doctor says, are you okay? It's like, well, actually, no, here's what we need. And a patient wants to be a good patient. They don't like to complain. And I think that's the role of somebody who's helping take care of them, is that you can be that mouthpiece. The doctor would come in to my husband. He would say, how are you? He goes, I'm just great. I'm super. And I'm like, wait a minute. You were throwing up all night last night. So what we really need is, you'll probably feel super if we can control the vomiting. So here's what I've noticed, and here's what I think we need. And wow, you got heard in a whole different way. Otherwise, you walk out and you're still puking tonight because you didn't want to complain today. And the doctors want to help.
Right. Against what people out there, a lot of people say they're just here to take my money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
If you believe that, why are you going? But yeah, you're right. Doctors are there to help, and they want to help. So we have to, as people going in, we have to help the doctors as well. And like I said, be orderly and know exactly what we want to tell them or to ask. Again, I'm just jumping around here about this topic, and I hope you don't mind me asking. Once the person is diagnosed with something, a serious illness, and if they don't have their life things in order, is that something that they should jump into right away?
It is.
Meaning like DNRs, wills, and things like that.
Durable powers of attorney and all those things. I recently had a personal experience with that as my father had a stroke. I'd been talking to my folks about doing a durable power of attorney for years and years. And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to think about it. And then, bam, all of a sudden, here you are. And what you can find is it's too late. Once you're deemed to be unable to make your own decisions, you now no longer have control. And there are states, a handful of states, that don't have any legal order that says that I, as your wife, can make your decisions once you become confused. I live in Missouri, and that happens to be one of those states. If I'm deemed to be confused, then my decisions get made only by a physician, and a physician who probably I just met when I'm in the hospital and doesn't know me or my values. Meanwhile, my wife, who knows me very well, is sitting there and can't legally consent for me to get care or consent to make things happen. That can all be avoided by signing a simple piece of paper and authorizing somebody to make that decision and getting it notarized before you are ever in that situation. As a death-defying society, though, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to do it. And now we're in a crisis and death hits us in the face. And if you're not competent, now you're in a whole legal battle for guardianship that can take a long time and cause you all kinds of problems, not to mention the money.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're in this society here where we're afraid to talk about the death thing. And just because you say, hey, we should talk about this and get everything ready so the kids don't go through, having to pay for this, pay for that, or figure out who's going to do what. And I think one of the worst things is, well, dad said that I was going to do this. No, that's not what dad told me.
Yeah.
Well, he said that that has got to be one of the worst things that tears a family apart, I think.
Yeah,
So,
and the other piece of that are the treatments that you want. Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to be coded? And helping people understand what that means. I had to have a very lengthy conversation with my dad for him to understand that it meant we're bringing you back from the dead. We're going to beat on your chest, and it's not like on Grey's Anatomy on TV. And people don't just go in and put little paddles on and jump and you're back to life and everything's fine. We do that because technically and legally you're dead. Your heart has stopped, and we're bringing you back. And he had just finished telling me a parable about Lazarus being risen from the dead. And he goes, if my sister did that to me, I'd be really mad if you bring me back from heaven. And I'm like, then why do you want to be coded? Because that's what we're doing. He goes, that's what that meant? Yeah, that's what that meant. So those conversations are a lot easier to have prior to somebody being sick and slightly confused than they are at the minute of a crisis, for sure.
yeah, we kind of went through something like that, but then the decision was finally made that, okay, we need to have that, the paper, we need to have the DNR, and it needs to be on the refrigerator. So in case
Yes.
somebody comes in, it's right there and they can see it. Don't put it in an envelope and put it in a drawer someplace, because that could either one be valuable time wasted trying to find it or trying to figure things out, or if things are done wrong, it could just really mess things up, I would imagine.
And in our society, life sustaining treatment is the default. So if I call the paramedics to come to my house because we're having some kind of a problem, they're coming with the intention of saving a life, not
Hmm.
with the intention of making you comfortable. If they see that you have that form somewhere out and you can hand it to them, now they're going to focus on making you comfortable, not on keeping you alive. And that's a big difference depending on what your values are and what you want. But our natural reaction is to pick up the phone, call 911, and get help when we panic, not really understanding that that means that in lieu of having paperwork, they're going to do everything they can in order to keep you alive. And if I'm healthy and I have a problem, that's exactly what I want. But if I'm 100 years old and I'm not really going to want my chest to be, my ribs to be broken and all of those things, that might not be what I want. And so it's my responsibility to make sure. I knew somebody actually that had it tattooed on their chest. They felt that
Uh,
strong. Don't touch me. Do not.
Really?
Yeah, because they were so afraid that they knew they had cancer, and they were so afraid that they literally tattooed it on their chest. And that's a pretty good suggestion.
Yeah. Actually, now you're making me think. Maybe what do I put? DNR? Yes, no on my chest or something.
Yeah, you could have a lot of fun with that.
But then people go through changing their minds a lot too.
That's right. And then you're in big trouble.
Little crosses out here, X's out. Oh gosh. Uh, so I'm stuck now asking a question as far as what do I want to ask? Where do I go with this grief? What do I ask you, doctor? what do
I think grief is a part of life, and it's
Mhm.
awful. It is really awful.
Yeah.
But in order to prevent it, it means you don't love. And is love worth it? And now that I've gone through it once, for instance, with my husband, it's something I have to ask myself, do I want to go through it again? Is it worth it again? And most of us would much rather grieve than to have never been loved. What a horrible thing. I mean, if you don't love anybody, then you're not going to be sad when they're gone, other than, oh, isn't that too bad? The same as we are when some stranger that we hear of dies. But wow, what we miss out on when we miss out on the love side. There's no easy way through grief. There's no quick exit. We have to go through it in order to survive it. Um, and I don't think you're ever completely over it. I still have sad days. Um, but I wouldn't trade any of that for the 25 years of love that I had.
Yeah.
And that's what people have to keep in mind. It's a part of life. Death and taxes, you don't get out of. And if you're going to love somebody, you are eventually going to lose them one way or another. And you can sit around and worry about that now, but that takes all the fun out of it. Just live and make memories and know that tomorrow's not guaranteed, and you'll face what happens.
I like that, and I know that we say it in half jokingly manner of, you know, live for today or live your life like this is the last day or the only day type of thing. But I think a lot of people don't do that,
Yeah.
and a lot of us always look at the impending whatever it is. Um, so those are good words that you said. I mean, just really live your life, live life. You know?
Right. And thus the title Living Room for the book, because you could make that journey about dying, or you could make that journey about living until you die. And and the same is true about life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Debra Oliver, um, Dr. Debra Parker Oliver.
Yes.
uh, is there anything else that you want to add to all of this as far as the person who's going through the illness, or for the person or persons that is receiving the bad news?
It's a process like anything else, and life is full of transitions. Things are not going to always be the same, and it can be tough. It's a family disease, it's a family thing, serious illness. It's not just a person that gets it, the whole entire family is affected. And how a family that's full of dysfunction is going to be full of dysfunction at the time of bad news and stress and sorrow. And they don't magically become different. But if they can unite in a way that is helpful for each other, or they can bring in people that are helpful to go through it together, is a whole lot easier than to go through it alone. To me, there's nothing that would be more sad than to die alone, and to know that the person I loved died alone. And we're just stronger when we're together. in sickness and in health, and in happiness and in sorrow. And so don't isolate yourself. Be there for one another. Um, it takes a village.
Sounds like a wedding vow to me.
Yeah, indeed.
Uh, and you're right. I'm glad you said that. That it's a family disease. It affects not only the person that is going through the illness, but all those around. So, and more the merrier, kind of, sort of, in a way. Keep that happiness going,
Yep.
and just go out there and love and live.
Yep. And when I'm down, pick me up. And when you're down, I'll pick you up. And it's a
Yep.
deal we make with one another to get through whatever we got to get through.
Well, again, Dr. Oliver, thank you very much. And again, the book is Legacies from the Living Room, a love grief equation. And it's legacesfromthelivingroom.com. And I encourage people to go there, take a look, get the book, read through the book, and just be prepared and be happy.
Very good. Thank you so much, Chuck.
You're welcome. Thank you.